Hey everybody, how you doing? Doug Barry here. We are live, BR Coalition YouTube channel, and I appreciate you being with me. This is kind of a last minute thing I decided to do earlier today and had a couple minor technical issues getting signed on here, but I appreciate you being out there. We are going to be discussing a couple of important things going on in the world right now. Right now we've got, this can be posted afterwards, of course, on the YouTube channel. But this is kind of last minute. Wanted to make sure we had a chance to get this out. This is being recorded. So again, it's going to go up live on the YouTube channel afterwards. And I'm hoping you'll share this with other people. Today is October 13th. Now, many of you know, I realize that this is the anniversary of a very famous moment that took place in 1917 in Fatima, Portugal. It is the anniversary of the sixth and final message that came to the three children in Fatima in 1917, where the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to these three children, little Jacinta, Francisco, her brother. Jacinta was 7, Francisco was 9, and their cousin Lucia, who's 10. And Jacinta and Francisco have been canonized. They are saints. And there is a cause being pushed, of course, for Lucia's canonization as well. Now, many of us know about Fatima. As Catholics, we're raised to hear about Our Lady of Fatima, statue of Our Lady of Fatima here behind me. She's in most all of the work that I do, most all the videos. These videos, the lives that I do, BR Coalition lives, most of my video work, the U.S. Grace Force YouTube channel, which we're currently on Rumble until December 11th. U.S. Grace Force is undergoing a little bit of a disciplinary measure. Imagine that. So Father Holloman and I are currently on Rumble. We encourage you to go out there and check out our podcast there. But she is also in those as well. Our Lady of Fatima has always played a very instrumental part in my life. And I know for many of you, she has and does. And she should. Now, there's something incredible about the images and the messages of Our Lady of Fatima. I've been talking about it for 37, 38 years approximately. And I'm still learning more. There's so much we can continue to learn, and not just on a factual basis. There are many, many great books and writings out there about the details regarding Our Lady of Fatima and the timing when she appeared, what was going on, how it related to even Pope Leo XIII and his writing of the St. Michael prayer, and 33 years before, and also the 100 years that we heard Pope Leo XIII, St. Michael the Archangel, prayer was written as a response to Leo XIII having an experience where he heard the voice of the devil bragging to Jesus that he could destroy the church if he had more power and more influence in the church. And so it is said that he was given an extended reign of power and influence, but our Lord said, you still won't destroy my church. And that 100 years estimated amount of time we are now past, many believe that began in 1917. So there's a lot of conversation, debate, discussion regarding the images, the messages of Our Lady of Fatima. One key thing is the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. In 1917, the Blessed Mother said that if this is on July 13th, the third of the apparitions, they began in May and ended in October. And in July, that particular apparition, the Blessed Mother said that if Russia was not consecrated to her Immaculate Heart, Russia would spread the error of her ways. And fast forward, many years go by, several popes made consecration. In 1982, it was said that John Paul II did it, but it wasn't made properly. In 1984, he did do it, but he didn't say Russia specifically. Now, there's a lot of armchair quarterbacking going on out there. You know this, where people will say, oh no, he said it wrong. He didn't do it right because of this and that and the other thing. And Lucia said this and that. And people have asked me this dozens and dozens of times because I've talked about the apparitions of Fatima hundreds of times over the years. All over the country, outside the country, it's one of my favorite things to talk about. And it's one of the key things, Marian prophecies, church approved, of the last 100 years or so, 105 years now, go back to Fatima, where the Blessed Mother has been warning us specifically of chastisements for the world. And in Fatima, there was a very clear warning of chastisement for the world. On July 13th, not only did she tell us that Russia would spread the error of her ways, she also said that if man did not stop offending God, there would be a second and much more terrible war than the war that was going on at the time, World War I, which began in 1914 and ended in 1918. So here in 1917, she says this war will end soon, and it did the next year. But there will be a second war. It will be far worse if man does not stop offending God. 21 years roughly, till 1938, when World War II really kicked into gear. And then the U.S. obviously brought into the war in 1941 at the bombing of Pearl Harbor. But in that amount of time, man had the opportunity to wake up and make some changes and didn't. In fact, 1930 was the time when the Conference of Lambeth, the Anglican Church, opened up the door to allow contraception to be used. And they said at their Conference of Lambeth that it would only be used in marriages in extreme cases where it was absolutely necessary and blah, 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 blah. And then they fast forward, they changed that and years later said it was just acceptable no matter what, pretty much. Well, when that happened in 1930, that was a major blow because no Christian religion, no denomination whatsoever had ever accepted contraception. That happened in 1930. Within that year, the Federal Council of Churches, speaking for some 20 or 30 different churches, different denominations, accepted it as well. Now, the Catholic Church spoke out in Casti Connubii, written by Pope Pius X, saying that you could not do this. Pardon me. And so what you have is this battlefield happening where contraception is allowed, which really opens up an enormous amount of problems for leading the way for all kinds of problems in family and marriage and such. And ultimately, it opens the door for abortion to be legalized in America and other parts of the world. Pardon me. So this is a time period from 1917 to 1938 between the prophecy of World War II and World War II happening, where you have a major, major time period in there where man could have done something. Now, some would say, well, but did the word get out about this? Yeah, 21 years or so. I mean, that's not a ton of time considering the technology back then compared to where we are now, where the word can be gotten out pretty quickly. Look what we can do right now. I can put an announcement out, and within moments, we're doing a live. This live is being recorded. This will get posted. This can be picked up by anybody all over the world right now. Now, I don't expect that to be, obviously, small voice in this big world, but that's the technology that we have, the platform that we have now to get the word out to the world like that. Back then, wasn't the case. But the amazing phenomenon of what took place in Fatima cannot be underestimated or underrated. You're talking about a time period where three little children, peasant children, basically, at first are given visions, I should say, 3 times of an angel. The angel of peace comes to them, 1916. Now, they're younger then, too. So here, 7, 9, and 10 years old when Our Lady appears to them in 1917. So you go back 9, 10, 11 months prior to that, and you've got 3 children that are around 6, 8, and 9 years old, give or take, and they are getting messages from an angel. The angel is teaching them to pray, telling them how much they need to pray, how serious this is, and that they're being prepared for a great mission. And then Our Lady appears to them on May 13th, 1917. So all of this in this time period of our world, just over 100 years ago. And with all of that, the 2 real serious warnings of Russia spreading the error of her ways and of a second world war, both very chastising moments for the world. And both have happened. Both have happened. Now, the third part of the secret of Fatima, I know people out there who have studied or looked at anything regarding Fatima are going to say it was revealed. No, it wasn't revealed completely. No, there's more to it because so-and-so wrote a book and said this about that, and this was about this, and then you had this over here. And you know what? There's a lot that we really don't know all the details on. And I've talked to a lot of people, interviewed a lot of people, spoken a lot of places, read a lot of books on this, and I can tell you that it boils down to a lot of this is above our security clearance or our pay grade. When people ask me, do you think the consecration of Russia was made appropriately, Doug? I would say, I really don't know for sure. Now, John Paul II, again, they said in 1982 he made it. but it wasn't done completely enough. So in 1984, he did do it, but he didn't mention Russia. And some say, yeah, but that's because Russia had spread the error of her ways to the world. So that was already everywhere because it was 50 plus years later after Our Lady asked for it. So he just encompassed the whole world into it. It is said, I wasn't there, Lucia didn't tell me personally, but it was said that Lucia said that it was accepted by heaven. So then recently we had another one with Pope Francis. And I knew that there would be people out there, and there were, who thought the moment, because the war in Ukraine had already begun with Russia, the moment he makes this is going to turn the tide of the war. Things are going to get better. That hasn't necessarily happened. A lot of people still dying. And now they're talking about this war ramping up to another level called World War III, called nuclear. So does this mean that the consecration that Pope Francis made in union with bishops all over the world and so forth was done incorrectly? I don't know. But I know one key thing that Our Lady asked for that a lot of us have not fulfilled. I know I haven't entirely. In Fatima, our Blessed Mother asked not only that Russia would be consecrated to her Immaculate Heart, she also, several years later in the 1926, 27, right in there, she and Jesus himself appeared to Sister Lucia and established the 5 first Saturdays. Many people have never made the 5 first Saturdays. That was part of the Fatima message. Devotion to her Immaculate Heart, which she talked about July 13th, 1917. God wishes to establish devotion to my Immaculate Heart. 1926, when she appears to Lucia in the convent, points out what this will look like. And much of it revolves around the idea of, not the idea, but the practice of making the 5 first Saturdays, going to Mass on the first Saturday of each month for 5 consecutive months. Obviously being in the state of grace, receiving communion, and then praying the rosary, which she asked for us to do every day, and meditating for at least 15 minutes on the rosary. Not a complicated request, not difficult to do. I've done it several times in my life. It can be done. Many people don't do it. Many people don't even know about it. Now, there's several things I want to say about this. And really, obviously, today is October 13th. It's the anniversary of the last apparition and the miracle of the sun. And there's real significance, and I want to share something very personal with you about this that I've never made public before, but I want to make public today. Look, there's a lot of speculation going on right now. And there's a lot of talk going on about where things are and what the Pope is doing now and the Novus Ordo and the Tridentine Mass and who's right and who's wrong. There's all kinds of mess out there that people are willingly participating in that ultimately is creating a lot of division in our world, in our church, in many hearts, among Catholics. God-fearing, God-loving, sacrament-receiving, rosary-praying, scripture-reading Catholics are divided over some of the most ridiculous things that we just should not be divided over. Okay, someone quotes this, someone throws this out, someone says they heard this or read this in a book. Look, the bottom line is, why pray the rosary? What's the whole point of making first Saturdays, praying the rosary? Is it to just check boxes and be done? Why be so concerned about the consecration to Russia if we're not going to focus on one of the key things that Our Lady asked us all to do, which is every day pray the rosary, every day. And I've said this, and I'll say this again and again. She doesn't ask us to do this with any particular criteria or stipulation. In other words, only pray the rosary if you feel good about it. Only pray the rosary if you get something out of it. Only pray the rosary if, you get that type of feeling and moment when you do. Face it, when you pray the rosary, if you're anything like me, a lot of times you pray it, it feels like that, right? It feels dry. It doesn't feel lofty. It doesn't feel maybe bad, but you don't feel this always invigorated feeling over it. You can feel good that you did it because she asked us to do it, and it's just a good thing to do. It's a meditation on the life of the Holy Family, going through the streets of Jerusalem, being in the stable at the Nativity, being at the foot of the cross, smelling in the air, the dust, the grit of it in your teeth, even as Jesus carries the cross up that hill. There's so many beautiful meditative things about the rosary that bring us to a relationship with God. It's not about necessarily knowing all the facts, knowing who said what, knowing whether or not the Pope did this the right way or the wrong way. This is not the message of Fatima, in my opinion. It's about this deeper relationship. It's always been that. But fasting, reading scripture, time for meditative prayer is about deepening a relationship. When you take time in your life to look at picture of a loved one, you're looking at your children, you're looking, your grandkids, you're looking at someone that you love, and you're looking at them and you're thinking about them. It brings you closer to them. You're thinking of memories with them. You're thinking of their voice. You're thinking of the way they laugh. You're thinking of any moment, good or bad, where you suffered through some difficult time with them, or you held their hand. If I think of my mother, she passed away 5 years ago. October 7th was her anniversary of her death. And if I think back to holding her hand towards the end of her life, praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet by her bedside shortly before she died, I think about my mother's laughter. I think about, the jokes that she made. You can go back. These things bring us closer to someone when we meditate, think about, contemplate. The rosary is a way to do that. This is a way to meditate, contemplate on the life of the Blessed Mother, of Saint Joseph, of Jesus Christ, of all the characters, if you want to refer to them as that, of the life of Jesus in those streets. You think about the beauty of, for example, my favorite mystery, the Wedding Feast of Cana. The Wedding Feast of Cana, that moment where the Blessed Mother turns to Jesus and says what he says. You can hear the sounds, if you think about it. Clanking of dishes, or people laughing, the talking, communication, someone's loud voice over here, like Uncle Harry's loud voice over back of the room. Oh, you miss you when you remember when, oh yeah, and then there was, yeah, he's in that room over there. And then the women over here are laughing and giggling over this or that, and then someone's complaining because they spilled something or dropped something, or someone's chasing their child. Jimmy, get back here, Jimmy! Where are you going? You can see this, you can hear this, you can smell that in the air. In the midst of all this, they run out of wine, and the Blessed Mother turns to Jesus in her gentle way, turns to Jesus and says, "Son, they're out of wine." And Jesus, for a moment, might have looked at her with those knowledgeable eyes. He is God, and says, "Woman, what does that have to do with me? It's not yet my time." He knows. He knows. She doesn't say anything to him. Nothing that's recorded in Scripture is said after that. All that we know that is recorded in Scripture is what she says to the servants. Do whatever he tells you. Now, we, again, don't understand what other conversation might have been going on at that moment. We don't know if Jesus would have said, "Mom, I told you." Yeah, no, obviously, I'm joking. But we don't know the details, but we can spend time meditating on that and thinking about that. Where the Blessed Mother simply says, "Do whatever he tells you." We don't know if she stood there, if she turned and walked away, but this is what happened. And Jesus instructs the servants to go collect water in the jugs and so forth, and bring them back, and then take it to the head waiter and let him taste it. And we understand now the miracle of the water being changed to wine. But if we spend the amount of time of one decade, right, on Our Father, 10 Hail Marys, and a Glory Be, takes about 2.5 to 3 minutes, depending on how fast you pray it. I timed it years ago because I wanted to know, especially in talking about the rosary, how long does it take to pray one decade of the rosary? About 2.5 to 3 minutes, roughly. And in 2.5 to 3 minutes, you can simply go into that moment where you're in that home and you're hearing those sounds. And you see, maybe you're across the room and you see the Mother of Jesus walk over to Jesus and talk to him, and you don't even know what the conversation is. And Jesus looks at her, look on his face, this loving son who is God to his mother. Maybe there was a smile when he said, "Woman, this is not my time yet." And maybe she smiled back and just looked at him with those eyes that said, "I'm your mother, and I'm asking this of you." Whatever those moments would have said, whatever the look in the eyes between Jesus and Mary, and the disciples standing there thinking, "What's going on here? What is this? What's she asking him? How loud did she say it? Did she say it loud enough for really anybody else to hear? Or how many would hear it? And the servants just doing their job. What, water? Oh, sure, we'll go get the water. Were they even paying attention, or were they talking about, how much they're getting paid and whether or not they're going to get off work in time? There's something they wanted to go do, their friends they wanted to hang out with, visit, whatever. We don't even know. But all of this in this moment, the smell in the air of the perfumes or the smell of the foods or whatever was going on there for that time period, all of that in 2.5 to 3 minutes. And when we take the time to go to this place in our mind and in our heart and actually think about this, it can open us up to a deeper relationship with God, a deeper relationship with God. So when the Blessed Mother comes to these 3 children in Fatima and says, pray the rosary every day, she could have easily added to that, because when you do, you come closer to me and my son and all of us, and we come into your life and we can help transform your heart. And when your heart is transformed and you are closer to us, everything is always, always better. Everything is. Especially when things are rough. Things will be better when we are deeply part of your life. If we can get that through our sometimes thick skull, and I'll be the first one to admit, sometimes the skull is so thick it's hard to get these messages, then we can realize that there is something deeply important about listening to what she asked of us. Now, why would she come at a time that she did during the greatest war ever at the time? World War I, the greatest war. In fact, it was called the Great War. It was called the war to end all wars. They said, we'll never have another war like this again. This will never happen again. This is so far beyond what man should ever be able to do. It was the mechanized war, gas, mustard gas, things of that nature, trench warfare, the tank, machine guns. The horse was starting to be phased out a little bit in favor of mechanized vehicles. They could destroy people with artillery shells much better now with advanced weaponry. Nothing compared to what we have now. BB guns, if that, slingshots in some ways compared to what we have now. And now in our world, we are being told in the news almost daily that we are this close to a third world war that could very easily be nuclear. The devastation of something like that is beyond what any of us can imagine. We remember movies like War Games, right? Matthew Broderick, the computer, why'd you like to play a game? And it turns into this, there's no way to win this. And so there is this attitude now of people saying, well, it's assured mutual destruction. I mean, there's no way anybody's going to do this. Okay, Putin wouldn't do it. We wouldn't do it. Iran wouldn't do it. North Korea wouldn't do it. China, they wouldn't do it because they would know that it would mean absolute devastation for them too. They just won't do it. Really? Do we really feel that confident? When people move far enough away from God, just look at the news right now. When you hear the most horrible stories, current story of a man arrested because a woman was discovered. She escaped out of his basement. She'd been there for at least a month. She was just taken out of a park, I think, if I'm not remember where it happened, and was chained up, repeatedly assaulted, horribly. And when the police found her, she had a metal collar around her neck that was padlocked on. There are people like that in the world. And some would say, yeah, but they're not at that level of power like heads of nations and such. Really? We really, really have confidence in that. When man, any of us, man or woman, we turn far enough away from God, we're capable of anything. Capable of anything. The famous quote from St. Philip Neri, and I know many of you who would be watching this right now, I'm sure you are well-versed enough, most of you at least, in that famous quote from St. Philip Neri. When he's moving through the city streets and he's got some disciples with him, men that he's mentoring and teaching and training and discipling, and he sees a man who's being led up the gallows to be put to death for murder. In the famous quote, he points at the man. He says, you see that man there? He says, but for the grace of God, there go I. Meaning, if not for the grace of God, I could end up a murderer. So when you have heads of nations out there who are far from God or moving away from God, like those out there who fight for the right, I mean, they will fight adamantly for the right for a woman to destroy a baby in her own womb. And they will punish people who prayerfully speak out against that, who kneel on a sidewalk in front of an abortion mill. They will go arrest them now. You've seen this in the news, so have I. Right? We have seen this more recently in our country here in America, pro-lifers being threatened, this chilling effect being spread now. So leaders can go all different directions when God is not their God. And there's an old saying, if God is not your God, something or someone will be, even if it's you. So when the Blessed Mother in 1917 warns us extensively that if man does not stop offending God, there'll be a second and more terrible war. Russia will spread the error of her ways. She puts a exclamation point on this, by the power of God, of course, on October 13th, to make it abundantly clear to the world that this is serious and it is of heaven. On October 13th, roughly 70,000 people had shown up at the Cova, the field where these apparitions had been taking place. 70,000. It is said that what I'm about to describe, and many of you know it, was seen for up to 40 miles around. So many, many, many more people saw this and experienced it very deeply, very personally. It had been raining for quite some time now, days before, at least a couple of days, and everything, the ground was wet. People were wet. You can see the pictures that are out there. They're online. They're old 1917 pictures of people just huddled under their umbrellas, and they're out there in the field because it was said that the Blessed Mother was going to appear, her final apparition. The children are moved through the crowd. They're brought up. People are afraid that if something amazing doesn't happen, and this great miracle that Our Lady said she would work, again, by the power of God, she cannot do this on her own. She does this by the power of her Son working through her. I will work a great miracle on October 13th. So everybody will know. Everybody will know on October 13th. So people were waiting for it. There were people who were there excited for it. They wanted to see it. They want to believe. Just like today, we want to believe. But there were people out there who wanted to discredit it, destroy it, tear it down. They tried to write against it. They said it was nothing but a fraud. It was such a fraudulent activity. So people of all kinds are there. And in a moment, Lucia says, look at the sky. And everybody looks up and the clouds open up and there is the sun. And everything around them, their clothing, the ground, all of it dries up like that. And people are staring at the sun. Everything is dry. Different colored rose petals, some report, are falling to the ground. People said they saw images in the sky of the Blessed Mother holding baby Jesus. They saw Jesus as an adult man. They saw Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. They saw the whole Holy Family was there. They saw Jesus bless the world. But they also saw the sun. They could stare at the sun, and their eyes were not damaged. They saw it spinning. They saw it pulsating and moving. They saw it vibrating. They saw it coming towards the earth and pulling back, coming towards the earth and pulling back. Several times this went on for several minutes. People were terrified. Many of them thought, this is it. This is the end. The sun is going to strike the earth. They were terrified by this. Can you imagine the immediate moment of conversion for many, many people? And again, this was seen for up to 40 miles around. It was reported by some. Now, to this day, people will say it was a mass hysteria moment, mass hallucination. Clearly, science can explain all of this. Explain then why many other apparitions since Fatima, the miracle of the sun has occurred. People were staring at the sun, seeing the sun, their eyes not burned. Rwanda in Africa. When that happened, 1981 to 89, for Saint Alphonsine, not Saint, forgive me, Sister Alphonsine. She saw from 81 to 89 messages and images of the Blessed Mother. There were two other visionaries who saw for a couple of years in there. And many times people saw the miracle of the sun. They could see the sun in the sky spinning. They would describe it in different accounts that I've read of a disc covering the sun, and out of the outer edges, this intense fire. Sometimes it was vibrating, pulsating, rotating, colors coming off of it. All of this in Rwanda and other locations too throughout the world. This miracle of the sun, the miracle of being able to stare at the sun, see it vibrating or spinning in the sky, is going on even today. Now, the 93 people in the room right now, I'm willing to bet someone in here has seen it. I don't know if you want to testify to that or not. Why is God allowing this to go on for people even today? I've traveled a lot. Literally, I have over 1 million miles literally on Delta Airlines alone. That's way too many to fly, but I'm a million miler, which doesn't do me any good, except if I'm ever on a Delta flight, they come by and they just say during the flight, "Thank you, Mr. Berry, for being a million miler." "Oh, you're welcome. Can I have some extra peanuts or pretzels or something?" We don't serve peanuts on airlines anymore because of allergies, but here's some pretzels. But I've traveled all over the place, and I've asked this question many, many, many times, dozens of times in churches and conferences all over. When I talk about the miracle of the sun, is there anybody here who has seen the miracle of the sun? And I will always see hands go up, half a dozen, a dozen. And then a lot of times people will come up to me afterwards and they'll say, "Hey, you know what? I got to admit, I've seen the miracle of the sun myself, but I didn't want to admit it because I felt uncomfortable. Look, it's not showing off. It's not bragging. God is allowing this. For some reason, people have been allowed by God to see this even today in our world right now. Look at what's going on. Look at the increase of problems that we're seeing in the world right now. The threats, the warnings, the heaviness, the times, it's a lot. And it's really startling a lot of people. So again, I've very rarely said this anywhere, small gatherings or to close friends. I've never made anything really public about this, but I just feel like in the times that we're living in right now, and as serious as everything is right now, I wanted to share this with you all. For many years now, I've been seeing this miracle of the sun. Many, many years ago, the first time I saw it driving down the interstate, this is probably 25 years ago, many of my members who worked with me in my ministry, Radix, been around since 1990 is when I started Radix. We're driving down, I'm driving in the van. It's about, 3, 4 in the afternoon. And I'm driving west on Interstate 80 and just looked up. There was a compulsion to look up and look at the sun, and looked up. And for just a brief moment, it's kind of bright. And then very quickly, the brightness goes away and I'm staring at the sun. So I pull over off the interstate right away, get off the interstate, and I'm shocked. And whoa, I can't believe this. And a couple in the back, "What's the matter, Doug? What is it?" And I told them. And one of them said, "Oh, you're seeing it. Oh, that's great." Well, I found out later he had seen it too in the past. Another young lady who worked for me in this ministry, Chris, one day I'm driving and I stop, and in the rearview mirror, I look back and I see she's staring out the window to the side. I said, "Chris, what are you doing?" She says, "I'm looking at the sun." That was about 25 years or so ago. And since then, I've seen it dozens of times. Now, you don't talk about this stuff very much because you don't want to give people the wrong impression. You don't want people to misunderstand. It doesn't mean that anybody is holier than anybody else because God allows something like this. That's not this at all. Trust me, I go to confession every couple of weeks, sometimes every week. Depends on how the week's going. But the point I'm getting at is we're all sinners, but for whatever reason, God is doing something right now. And I think he's trying to send a message. My gut feeling, my personal opinion, not armchair quarterbacking anything. Don't know God's mind. I get a sense, though, that number one, we're getting a lot closer than we may realize to things changing very substantially. Very, very substantially. Not a prophetic message. I'm not that. I'm not that guy. It's gut feeling. And I don't think I'm the only one. I think a lot of you would feel the same way. I'd be surprised if If people wouldn't chime in and say, oh, yeah, I get the same feeling, get the same feeling. I think there's something, though, behind why people are seeing the sun. I have seen the sun lately very frequently, very frequently. Oftentimes, there are colors coming off of it. Normally, the colors are pinkish, rose colored, or yellow, goldish in color. A couple times I saw it within the last month, month and a half, and the colors were different. They were red, kind of a medium to darker red. Now, I don't want to go into a lot of detail about this, except simply to say what I see when I see this is very much like what I've read and heard of others throughout the years. It's like a perfect disc covering it. If the disc were removed, you feel like you would be eviscerated by the intensity of it. Around the very outer edge of it is this intense, almost vibration. The light is so intense. And then just outside of that, these colors just flowing off of it. Also very, very substantial. I've heard people who've described this and seen the colors come off, and they would say, and the colors seem to form what appears to be a handle of a monstrance and even touching the horizon. I've heard people say that they've seen in the disc the shape of a cross. So different people seem to be receiving different things. But a lot of people are seeing this. Someone I see commented here, Charmaine says, a friend of mine just saw it a couple of weeks ago. So cool. Yep, I agree. Signs of the times pointing to things getting worse before they get better, says Dennis. Good to hear from you, brother. Good to see you out there, our friend from South Florida. I had this experience with the sun, caught my eye through the side mirror. Oh, I just lost it. It went pretty fast there. Hold on here. Sorry, I was reading it and it disappeared. Okay. Oh, retracted. Okay, she retracted. Okay. We are living in times, though, where people are seeing this more and more. And what's the reason? Don't know. I can say that in the past, and I did want to share this all with you, and I didn't know how far I would go with this. But this morning, I was recording some radio spots with a Catholic radio station out in St. Louis. St. Louis, great place. And I was recording these spots, and we were talking a little bit about today being October 13th. And it just struck me, you know what? Maybe today's the day to share it. To let at least the people that, our friends through, our YouTube channel and such, and Facebook friends and coalition friends, just let them know about it. Because I don't want to hold anything back if there's something here that we should be thinking about more seriously. I put a post out yesterday on Facebook, and I simply said, a difficult thing to stomach is how many people are ignoring the signs of the times. The response has been pretty substantial for a statement like that, because I think a lot of people are feeling the same way. There's a lot happening in our world right now that is different than ever before. Not trying to sensationalize, not trying to become dramatic here. Not the point, not a good idea to do that. That's not what we're doing. We're not going to cue the dramatic soundtrack music right now. That's not what we're doing. But what we're saying is there's a lot happening. There's a lot of threat out there that we should be very concerned about. Enough that we deepen our prayer. Now, I want to give hope in all this too. While in the past, when I would see the sun, there was always some sort of consoling sense in general, a consoling sense, consoling feeling. As of the last month and a half to 2 months or so, that has not been the case. Again, not being prophetic here, that's not me. I'm not that guy. But I'm simply telling you what I get in my heart over it when I pray about it and think about it. And it's much more of an ominous feeling. What does that mean? I don't know. So I share it with you so that you are at least aware that this is happening. If it means anything to you, great. If it doesn't, oh well. Not trying to do anything with this except simply tell you all that as a fellow Catholic, as a friend, as a family member, we're all family, aren't we? Want to encourage and support and want to help people be prepared for whatever's coming naturally and spiritually. And spiritually, we've just got to deepen the prayer. Naturally, smart to do the things that are obvious, food, water, and so forth. You may have heard this. This was a couple days ago. In fact, I posted this on my Facebook page. I got it open right here. I'm going to roll down to it right here. This was reported, I put it up 2 days ago, world's largest blackout ever leaves 140 million people without power. South Asian country of Bangladesh experienced a massive power outage on Tuesday, the largest ever in the world. According to the Sun, over 80% of the nation, around 140 million people were left without power. So yes, on a natural level, these things can happen. So yes, it's smart to have backup when it comes to food, water, shelter, all the stuff that we talk about in BR Coalition. Here's another story that happened the same day. Russian hackers claim responsibility for crashing 14 American airport websites in a massive coordinated cyber attack. So in a coordinated cyber attack, 14 American airports websites were crashed. We're talking about, let me scroll down here. We are talking about airports such as LaGuardia in New York, O'Hare in Chicago, Hartsfield Jackson International in Atlanta, and 9 other airports. So the top 3 they mentioned were LaGuardia, O'Hare, and Atlanta. That's major. The airport websites were hit, simultaneously coordinated, and crashed along with 9 others. So 14 of them, or 11 others. So what's the point here? On a natural level, there are things out there that tell us we would be wise to be prepared. But on a supernatural level, because there are things that are beyond our control, obviously, we are wise to be spiritually prepared. If you go back to Fatima, 1917, what did the Blessed Mother give us as a means for one of the most powerful spiritual preparations out there? That's the daily rosary. To pray the rosary daily. And again, I emphasize this again and re-emphasize this. It's not about whether we feel good about it. It's not about whether we have that lofty moment. If you do, that's great. I normally don't get anything like that. I mean, sometimes, yeah, there are moments when I pray the rosary and there's this connection where you just feel, wow, something is very powerful and deep here. That's awesome. But most of the time, it's just a matter of I'm doing this. I calm myself down. I try to sit still. Sometimes I do it when I'm driving. Sometimes it's when I've prayed the rosary sitting on my lawnmower. I've prayed the rosary going for walks. I've prayed the rosary washing the dishes when I've had to wash dishes by hand when the dishwasher is not working. I'm just going to do some dishes by hand. Whatever it is, you can bring the rosary into your day to day. But to sit still, to calm yourself, and to be in that moment where you're just spending time with God. In the end, that's the most important thing. Deepen the relationship, spend the time with God. But because we are seeing these things happen in our world right now, all the more reason for us to take this seriously, and all the more reason for us to not remain silent when trying to encourage other people to do this. There is something happening now with regards to all the signs of the times, all the talk of World War III. Don't forget the Blessed Mother in Cuapa, Nicaragua in 1980, church-approved apparition, did say that because we were not responding well enough to her urgent call for conversion, she said, you are hastening the arrival of a third world war. Because you are not responding to my call for conversion, you are hastening the arrival of a third world war. Now, if that doesn't wake us up to the reality of our times, I don't know what else does. That was in 1980. And then fast forward to where we are now. According to different reports, Father Andrew Apostoli had said, and we had Father Andrew Apostoli, he's deceased now, God rest his soul. He was CFRs, Franciscans with Father Benedict Rochelle. And so we had him on the EWTN's Life on the Rock when I co-hosted Life on the Rock with Father Mark Mary for 8 years. We had him on as a guest one night. He's an expert on Fatima, and he was talking about how it was revealed to him that because of people's prayers and consecration to the Blessed Mother, to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, that World War II was shortened by a couple of years because God heard the prayers. Imagine if World War II would have gone on 2 more years. At that point, Adolf Hitler had already achieved rocket technology, and he had the V1 and V2 missiles. Um, Accuracy wasn't great, but that could have easily been improved and developed. Figure 2 more years of war with that kind of technology and development. We had come up with the atomic bomb at that point. Other countries would have come up with it too. Do we think for a moment that Hitler wouldn't have used the atomic bomb, considering the madman that he was? Now, fast forward to where we are now, when you're talking about Russia having in the neighborhood of 6,000 nuclear weapons, tactical and ICBMs and everything in between, the US having approximately the same, just under that. We have numbers of weapons, of bombs, missiles. We have arsenal out there that is completely off the charts compared to what was going on in World War II. And if man was capable of reaching the point of war back in the 1930s and 40s of World War II with that type of weaponry, it could happen again now. This assured mutual destruction, mutual assured destruction idea is not going to hold water when you've got somebody who is godless and move far enough away from any kind of reason or truth. When people don't care, it's very similar to when Saddam Hussein was beat in the first Gulf War. What did he do when he left Saudi Arabia? He set everything on fire. It was a slash and burn, scorched earth tactic. We're going to set all the oil platforms on fire and then we'll leave. So there are people out there who simply want to watch the world burn. That's in scripture. It's also in one of the Batman movies. That's another story. But in scripture, there is this reference that there are people who just have a heart for destruction. Bottom line, they have a heart for chaos and destruction. The rosary is a remedy. It is a plan. It is a weapon against evil. More of us need to be praying it devoutly. Devoutly doesn't necessarily, again, mean that we're in this posture all the time. In fact, I tell you, when I see pictures of saints out there who, the images that they show of the saints is this lofty position of prayer, I think it's beautiful. That's great if that was them. That's not me, and it's not a lot of people. I think for some of us, the posture is this, right? It's face buried in the hands. It's sitting on the edge of your bed, literally or figuratively, any time of the day or night, and you're in this posture and you're just wondering, Lord, I don't get it. I don't understand what's going on. Where are you in this? Lord, please help. Maybe some of you feel that right now. I feel that way sometimes. We go through, as Saint Ignatius talks about, we go through spiritual desolation and consolation, discernment of spirits. We have these moments where we fluctuate. We're all over the place. So when people are in desolation spiritually, a lot of times I don't want to pray the rosary. I don't feel good about it. It's not clicking with me right now. Why would I want to pray it when I don't feel anything about it? That's not the way to look at it. Because again, our Blessed Mother in Fatima didn't say, and nor has she in any other apparition where she talks about praying the rosary, she doesn't say, pray the rosary every day, only if, or when you feel, or in this case only. She says, pray it. And then she reminds us of the evil that's in the world when she tells us, as she did in Cuapa, Nicaragua, of the hastening of a third world war. Again, I didn't want to share this with you about the miracle of the sun and my personal experiences with it. And again, it's been 25 years, give or take, since it started. And for the longest time, it was so periodic. It was maybe a couple times, I don't know, every few months, maybe, give or take, when something like that would happen. And I could tell the difference. If anybody's wondering, I could tell the difference because there are times when I would think, I wonder if I can see the sun. I would look up and instantly you feel like your eyeballs are on fire. And you get that white spot in your eye. You look for a second or two, and then you look around, and everywhere you look, you got that white spot, that glowing white spot that's there, Yeah, that's not this. This is different. Anytime I've done it that way, that's been the result. The white spot in the eye. I feel like, okay, that was not smart. This is only when there's a compulsion, as if there's the nudge that says, look, and boom, look up, and sometimes it's immediate, and sometimes there's a second or two where it's really bright, and then the brightness just dissipates, and that disc seems to appear there, and I can stare at it for minutes at a time, And sometimes the only reason to look away is because I've got to keep moving on with things. I was getting off a plane recently in Dallas, and I got off the plane and got on the Skylink, which is a train that takes you from terminal to terminal, and it's up on the top. And this is late afternoon. I get on the Skylink and we're moving around. And I look over and there was the compulsion look, and I looked at the sun and there it was. And I got off the Skylink, went back down to the terminal I needed to be in, and went over and sat in the chair that was facing outside. And I just sat there and just stared at it for several minutes. And that is when I saw the red color start coming off of it like crazy, just like in waves. So after several minutes, I just got up and walked away and just prayed about it. I don't know what it means. And again, I'm not saying this for any reason other than just to share with you that something is happening. And again, I know I'm not the only one, because when I've asked people at conferences, how many people have seen it, hands will go up every time. I was in San Antonio at a conference with good friends of mine, Greg and Julie Alexander. It was a dinner gala for their Alexander house down there. 400 and some people roughly in the room, and I was a keynote speaker, and I was giving a talk, and I was talking about Fatima. I didn't mention to anybody that I had seen the sun, but I did ask about it because I wanted to talk about the prophecies a bit, and they wanted me to bring some of this up. I said, has anybody seen the miracle of the sun? And at least I'd say 12, 15 hands went up, just instantly. People are seeing it. That was first part of August. So be aware of it in relation to the signs of the times, the things that are happening in our world right now. Be aware that there is something else going on in these ways. In addition to that, and this has never happened to me, people's rosaries have turned gold. Now, anybody who's Medjugorje follower, I don't talk about Medjugorje much at all because it hasn't been approved by the church, hasn't been condemned. I have nothing against it. I know many people who've been to Medjugorje and have had amazing experiences. A priest friend of mine from Florida was there. He was ready to leave the priesthood. He was just so distraught, and parishioners put him on an airplane, flew to Medjugorje, and he said he felt like his heart was completely ripped out, reordered, and reinserted, and his whole life changed, and he just grew in his faith just enormously. So I know stories like that of friends of mine who've been there. I've never been there. I don't have those experiences, but I know many people who have. They're seeing the sun over there too. And rosaries, especially people from Medjugorje and others, their rosaries are turning gold. So when you have these types of miracles happening to so many people, so peppered throughout the world, I just think you kind of got to look at that and realize that God is maybe saying something here. I believe, my gut feeling, because people will ask sometimes, when we've just talked about the miracle of the sun. And again, I've rarely told anybody of my own case, my own story, but people say, what do you think it is? What do you think it is? I think my own armchair quarterbacking here is maybe it's God's way of saying, don't forget what I said to you in 1917 about the importance of the urgent call for conversion and the reality of the consequence of chastisement if you don't respond. Especially now that we're seeing all kinds of, don't even call it saber rattling, because it isn't just that anymore. There are things happening. There are 14 airports get hacked. Power goes out for 140 million people. Now, I know people will say, well, it's probably just some coincidence, this and that. I just had recently a conversation with someone. I've got to be careful because I don't want in any way jeopardize the guy who is in a position. All I'll say is that he's in the position to know a lot about what you will not see in the news. Okay. And in this position, he said, and he does know, I can say this, we are closer than anybody realizes, far more than even what you're seeing in the news, to an all-out global conflict that could very easily be turned into something nuclear. Far closer than anybody realizes. This is not a doom and gloom. This is not sky is falling. That's not what any of this is. If you're watching this live right now, you're watching this video later and replay, you know by now that there's enough evidence out there to point out that things are are pretty rough in the world, and there's a lot of warning signs out there. It shouldn't be a surprise to us if a cyber attack hits here or there, or the power grid goes down here or there. We should not be surprised by this. Okay, I've heard from people who are involved in a particular friend that I have who is involved in internet computer security. His job is to help his clients stay secure. And he said in the last month, the hacking has exponentially risen for his clients. And he's not dealing with big banks like the Chase Manhattan type bank or Citibank, people on that level. He's talking, or airports. He's talking about lower level, lower fruit, you could say, lower hanging fruit, individual people whose businesses just in general are being hacked at a much greater rate. I said, do you think this has anything to do with testing of perimeter, to just kind of poke the bear a little bit, kind of poke and see what's going on, how people respond to it? He said, oh, that's what some of it looks like, is to see how we will react, how people will respond when there is some sort of an attack here or there regarding cyber. So we have that in addition to all the other pieces and all the other red flags and all the other signs of the times that are out there for us to really seriously look at and then respond in the ways that we can. And I will always say it's a good idea to have even an emergency bag in your vehicle, a go bag, a bug out bag, in case you need something there, whether it's a jump start for your dead battery or food or water or extra pair of gloves. If you're in a situation where you need gloves, I don't care what your scenario is, here in Texas, it's not about winter, but I keep extra gloves, work gloves and such in my Jeep. That's a good idea. Extra food, extra water is a good idea. Community is a good idea. Having all these natural things in place because we don't know what sort of things can come. That's all so important. But I will say this, and I'm going to start wrapping this up. There's so much out there right now, so much that is overwhelming, so much in the news. You can easily allow yourself to be consumed by it and let it really break your spirit. Don't give in to that. I watch the news every day, but I don't always dive into it deeply. I pay attention to certain things, and certain stories grab my attention, and I will look at MSNBC stories, to CNN stories, to Fox News stories, to LifeSite News stories. I look at a lot because I want to get a good overview of what's going on. And you connect dots in certain areas. But then there are days when I just back off and I pay very little attention to it. I've got to pray constantly, and I've got to try to listen to where my heart is on this and pay attention again to the spirits of desolation, consolation. And you've got to be careful about this sort of stuff. So you've got to listen to your heart, and you're going to be able to do that when you're in prayer. So be in prayer, listen to your heart, and be cautious about letting yourself be overwhelmed by the news. You don't even have to listen to the news anymore to realize that we're on the brink. I mean, you can shut the news off right now and realize that God's going to allow something to happen sooner or later, and probably sooner than later, just based on what we already know. So it's not as if we have to keep on top of every single thing out there. It is good to be aware of the events that are happening. And you can do that in about 20 to 30 minutes every day. You can just look at headlines and realize, okay, this and this and this. Yep, we got this going on. Yep, you defund police, you're going to get problems in your city. Yeah, that's going to happen. Yeah, when you got bad politicians, you're going to have bad policies. Yep, that's going to happen. Yep, this is showing us that people are really buying the lie of this emergency or this emergency out there. Yep, that's going on still. Okay. You can figure all that out pretty quickly by just hitting some of the highlights and the headlines. So we want to be careful about some of that and not be overwhelmed by it. There's a point in a time when you just got to put your head down, focus on what you know you need to do for you and your loved ones, and move forward. Keep moving forward. When I hear the stories of talk of war and threats of war, and Putin may do this and Ukraine may do that, and this may happen here, and China, Taiwan, and Iran may this, and North Korea, you hear this and you think, wow. You can't just sit back anymore and say, it's just empty saber rattling. We can't do that, because we were told that months ago when 150,000 troops were on the border in Ukraine. And then on a given day, they crossed the border, and this whole Ukrainian thing is on. And now it's affected the world in many different ways. It's been manipulated, obviously, and so forth and such. But with all of that, we can't just say that this is all empty saber rattling. We have to realize that these things have escalated and could escalate even more. Then you bring into it the spiritual aspect of what's happening in the church and the complete breakdown and chaos in many areas of the leadership of our Catholic faith and other Christian denominations too, by the way. And we realize there's a lot more going on here. In the spiritual realm, we see this in leadership of the church problems than a lot of people want to acknowledge. You bring all that into it, and then you bring into it little, you know, little guys like me or someone else out there, someone else who was mentioned, who are, for whatever reason, you see the miracle of the Son and you think, well, what is this lowly sinner like me? What is the point? Except God may be saying, look, I'll pick anybody out there. Really, you want to get the word to you. The bigger miracles are the conversions. The bigger miracles are dedication to depth of prayer, dedication and commitment to a faithful life, dedication to really focusing on sticking to what the Blessed Mother asks us to do no matter what. Those are things that a lot of people are doing, and they're not seeing the sun, and they're not having rosaries turn gold. They're not having things like that, but they're doing it anyway. That's amazing. A lot of people doing that. We just had the Rosary Coast to Coast event in Washington, D.C. That's what our current podcast is about. Father Heilman, myself, many others were out there. Monsignor Pope, Bishop Coffey, just a lot of good people out there. And we processed through the streets with the Blessed Sacrament, and then set up out there on the National Mall with the Capitol building behind us, and had the Rosary Rally. And it was live streamed, and there were dozens and dozens and dozens of people all over the United States and other countries who were praying the Rosary simultaneously. There are so many amazing people out there who are engaged in this spiritual fight, and they're swinging away hard on that battlefield. Thanks be to God, with prayer and fasting and sacraments. That's what we need to focus on. But we do need to understand that we are at a time period where things can happen like that. And that's something I don't want you to forget. So I'm going to wrap this up here. A couple quick search here through any comments. And I just want to make sure that we are taking seriously the times that we're in, and seriously the role that we have in these times, because we do have a part to play in this. And we can do a lot if we just step up our prayer, our focus on faithfulness to God. Let's see. Nicole said, I had this experience, caught my eye from the side mirror of my car. It was spinning like a disc. I thought I was crazy. No, you're not, Nicole. It does. It spins like a disc. Yeah. To me, it just it's got this spinning, vibrating sort of thing. And it's a phenomenal sort of moment. And my eyes should be burned by now. I've seen this dozens of times over the last 25 years or so, stared at it for minutes at a time. And I'm still seeing things fine. A friend of mine who's a retired ophthalmologist, he was at an event probably 15 years ago. We were there. He was still practicing eye doctor. And he said teenagers, it was a youth rally event somewhere. I forget where it was. And people were reporting seeing the sun. And he told me, Dr. John, he said, people came up, kids were coming up, my eyes, what do you think? And he looked at them, checked them out right there. He said, your eyes are fine. There's nothing I can see. It looks like they're damaged at all. Well, what do you think this is? He says, it's a miracle. He's a faithful Catholic doctor. He's a good guy. So, so I can speak from an ophthalmologist who actually studied some people's eyes who'd seen it right there on the spot and said, no damage whatsoever seen in their eyes. So there are people around who are seeing this. Let's see here. Anybody else here? You're welcome, Joanna. Okay. Yeah, female Casey Royals fan. Didn't Mary also say God would use Russia to punish the world? Yes, that was also brought out in there. Yeah. Yep, Mother Miriam has been talking about being prepared as well. Yep, Mother Miriam. She's been out there swinging away too, trying to encourage people. Many of the people, whether it's Father Heilman, Father Ripperger, Father Mike Leitner, other friends of mine, Father James Altman, others out there who, Mother Miriam. I mean, I've been very, very fortunate and blessed to know them for many years. And they will all say, as they've told me personally, privately, they have a different sense now than before of the times. These are all, I count them much holier, much more prayerful, incredible people. And they are all saying very similar things. There is something different. Take it seriously. Deepen your prayer. Be ready naturally in the ways that you can, and then trust the rest to God. We don't know what this looks like. There are prophecies that the U.S. will be hit, but that God will shield the U.S. from too many strikes. There will definitely be some chaos and death, but there will not be utter devastation. We are hearing a lot of different prophecies out there. And so when you hear those prophecies, keep some of those at arm's length, meaning be careful, because we don't know for sure if obviously the legitimate, someone can claim prophecy and it doesn't happen, or they claim prophecy, they put stipulations on it, it doesn't come true, credibility is tested or lost. Be cautious about those things. So keep messages from living so-called visionaries, prophets, locutionists, keep them at a certain arm's length, out of a certain prayerful prudence and discernment and skepticism, for the sake of not being misled. But that being said, don't completely discount it if it's lining up with others that are valid and solid. So that's why I always emphasized over the years, and still will emphasize, go to the church approved Marian apparitions of old, such as Fatima, Our Lady of all nations in Amsterdam, where Ida Perdaman received images of the Blessed Mother, visions of the Blessed Mother and Jesus hundreds of times over many years, late 40s, early 50s, and also was shown cataclysmic events that would be worse than World War II, all kinds of things, just terrible things. If we do not repent, if we do not lessen or mitigate by God's grace through our efforts of prayer, fasting, sacrifice, and so forth. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to share this with you, and decided kind of last minute, and it was very last minute. In fact, I wasn't sure I was going to talk about my own personal experience with the sun until I literally sat down in front of the camera. Honestly, up until I sat down in front of the camera, I really wasn't thinking I was going to do it. Sat down, camera got rolling, and I thought, you know what? Maybe I should, because I want to encourage people to hope. I want to encourage people to persevere. And I want to share with you these things, because you need to understand, this is not me. I am not the lofty guy. That's not me. So for this to happen so many times over the years is absolutely baffling to me, that I would get this. And so let that be part of this. Is It's not me to get these types of messages. So I share that with you, of my experience with seeing the miracle of the sun, these dozens of times over the years, and much more frequently lately, much more frequently. And the only thing I can say is, in the past, the sense was a sense of consolation. And as of late, it has been much more of an ominous, heavy feeling that we're much closer to something. And what that is and when that is, no clue. But as I was talking recently with a friend of mine, and he's the guy that's in the computer technology stuff, and I said, "Do you remember 9/11 where you were?" Yeah, I do. Yeah, me too. I remember I'd just come home from morning mass. It was 9 something in the morning for us here in Nebraska. We're homeschooling our kids, went to morning mass, came home, phone call from family member said, "Hey, turn the TV on." Turn the TV on. The first tower had already been hit. We saw the second tower get hit, and then everything changes. I mean, it's that fast that things happen. So be ready spiritually. Do the best you can to be ready. And because the Blessed Mother has told us when we pray the rosary, she promises to be with us. That's one of the best things we can be doing right now, is get that rosary prayed every day. Pay attention to the news, but don't let it overwhelm you. That's my advice. It's my encouragement to you. Stay in that deep relationship with God through prayer, sacraments, all the basics that the church gives us that we know are tried and true. Stick with those, make those part of your day-to-day life. And then also enjoy the simple pleasures that are out there. Enjoy them, the good things that God gives us to enjoy, whether it's beautiful sunset, right? Talking about the sun, whether it's time with your kids, your grandkids, a walk, on the beach with a good friend, time with loved ones. Just enjoy the moments, enjoy the times that God gives you that are good, because they're intended for us to enjoy. God gives them to us to appreciate and enjoy. And it's easy. I know this because I've been doing this for a long time, talking about these things for a long time, and I have lost sleep over them. And it's easy to let this stuff, it can be easy, I should say, if we're not careful, to let this stuff start to consume us to where we walk around with a long, mopey face all the time. I have that sometimes. I got the serious look on my face. I got the serious look anyway. People say I have a resting, angry face. I don't know where that comes from. Who would say that about me? But I can say that you can let this hit you. So you've got to make time to enjoy the simple pleasures. And that term simple pleasures I got from a picture hanging in the church basement up in Nebraska, in Lincoln. And it was the picture of a baby, like a baby fox, it looked like, just laying in the grass with one like long piece of grass through its mouth. And you could tell it was just chewing on that grass. And it was looking right at the camera when the photographer got the shot. And all the picture says is simple pleasures. This little fox just chewing on that piece of grass. He was loving it. He was enjoying it. So whatever the good, holy, simple pleasures are that God gives you, enjoy them every day. Thank God for them. Appreciate them. Encourage others to do the same. But don't turn a blind eye to what's going on out here in the world, because we Christians are going to be used by God in some way, shape, or form to be part of this time to help people find God, be close to God, and be better prepared for whatever is unfolding right now and whatever is coming. All right, I could go on about this. Again, this was kind of spur of the moment. I got this idea earlier today just to do this live. So I appreciate you joining me. And it's going to be, obviously, it's being recorded, so it will go up on the BR Coalition YouTube channel. So if you want to share this with others and encourage others to give it a listen to and a watch, just so they can hopefully be encouraged. Again, not denying the seriousness of our times at all, understanding the prophecies of Our Lady, the warning signs that we're getting, the need for us to be deeply prayerful, enjoy the simple pleasures of life while we can, and realize that sooner or later, we're going to be called up, if we're not being called up already, to be part of this and engage in this. So let's be prepared best we can, so when God calls us, we're ready to go. And that can happen, remember, that fast. All right. I want to thank you all for being with me. I'm going to bug out of here now. And God bless and strengthen you all in this struggle. Just know we're not alone. God's with us. Our Lady's with us. And we want to be together as brothers and sisters in this as well. So let's pray for each other nonstop. God bless and strengthen you. Talk to you again soon.